My best friend texted me, "Did you feed my fish?" And I immediately put together a plan to save her life. In college, my roommate Priya and I created a code for bad dates, where if either of us texted that question, the other would call with a fake emergency. But we had a rule. You only use the code if you're actually scared. Not bored, not annoyed, scared. We used it maybe 6 times sophomore year, and that was 15 years ago. I was at a dinner party with 10 people when my phone buzzed under the table. Priya and her husband Ellis were sitting directly across from me, and Ellis was telling a story that had everyone laughing. Priya was laughing too, looking at him adoringly. I glanced at my phone and my stomach dropped. "Did you feed my fish?" From Priya. I looked up, but she wasn't looking at me at all, just smiling at Ellis like nothing was wrong. I texted back a question mark and watched her, but she didn't check her phone. I started paying closer attention. Ellis's hand wasn't resting on her shoulder like I thought, but gripping it, knuckles white. And when Priya reached for her wine glass, he squeezed until she put her hand back down. She was wearing long sleeves in July. I texted bathroom 5 minutes and saw her hand drift under the table for half a second before returning to her lap. I waited in the bathroom for 10 minutes, but she never came. When I went back, Ellis was whispering something in Priya's ear, and she was nodding with her smile frozen in place. I said, "Priya, can you help me grab something from my car?" Ellis's head snapped toward me, and for just a second, his face twisted into something ugly before he covered it with a smile. He said she was exhausted and he should get her home. I said it would only take 1 second. He stood up with a hard edge in his voice and said, "I said no." The table went quiet and he laughed like he was joking, saying he was just protective of his girl. He pulled Priya up by the arm and I saw her wince. I said, "Priya, are you okay?" Ellis answered for her, said she was fine, just tired. Priya nodded with her eyes on the floor and repeated that she was fine. Ellis guided her toward the door with his hand clamped on the back of her neck, and at the door she looked back at me with terrified eyes and mouthed something I couldn't make out. Then they were gone. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I parked down the street from their house at 7:30 because I remembered Ellis usually left for work around 8. His car was still there at 8, at 9, at 10. At noon, he finally drove away, and I waited 5 more minutes, then ran to the door. Priya opened it and her face went white. She yanked me inside with her hands shaking and whispered that I had 10 minutes because he'd gone to get groceries, and he timed himself, and if he was late, he'd think she'd done something. I told her we were leaving right now. She shook her head crying, saying she couldn't because he had her keys, her cards, her passport. He'd cut up her license. He tracked her phone. Last time she tried to leave, he found her in 2 hours, and then she stopped talking and slowly pushed up her sleeve. Bruises in the shape of fingers wrapped around her forearm, some faded yellow and some fresh purple. I told her to leave the phone because I had everything else and we were going now. She said he'd told everyone she was crazy, that she hurt herself, that he was protecting her from herself. I grabbed her hand and told her I believed her, and that was all that mattered. She grabbed her shoes and we ran. In the car, she told me everything while I drove. He'd quit his job 6 months ago to watch her, and he monitored her phone, her email, and the doorbell camera. She hadn't been alone in 6 months. Last night was the first time she could text me, and she typed it blind under the table while he was distracted. I drove straight to a domestic violence shelter, and they took her in. Within 2 hours, Ellis was calling my phone, his voice calm and reasonable, saying he knew she was with me and she wasn't well, and I should just tell him where she was. I hung up. At midnight, he showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door and yelling that she needed her medication, and she'd hurt herself without him. I called the police, and he left before they arrived. He started texting Priya from a new number, first saying he forgave her, then saying no one would believe her because he'd made sure of that, then saying if he couldn't have her, no one would. I screenshotted everything. At the protective order hearing, Ellis showed up in a suit looking concerned, telling the judge Priya was mentally ill and he was trying to help his sick wife. The judge looked at the screenshots and the photos of Priya's arms. She granted the order immediately and told Ellis if he came within 500 feet of Priya, he'd be arrested. Priya has her own apartment now with a new phone and a deadbolt I helped her install. We still have the fish code and will probably have it forever.